Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of 3D Design, brought to you by the Corona Public Library's Maker Exchange. My name is Mr. Martin, and today I'm showing you how to design your own 3D printable snowflake to use for decorations in the upcoming holidays. Without further ado, let's get started. As you can see, I am back in 3D Builder. I'm going to select New Scene, and the first object I will insert today is a hexagon. Now, using the Scale tool down here on the bottom, I can simply edit the Z-axis, in this case the one that goes up and down, to be the desired height that I'd like. Note that you can unlock or lock the object, so that just makes it a little easier to deal with, and now we have a model here of appropriate thickness. So we can also copy-paste using Control-C, Control-V, and as we've done before, I'm going to create a cutout here, but first I need to create an object to make the cutout with. And so I've copied the hexagon. I'm going to move it over and then scale it to the appropriate size. Once I've done that, I'm going to then edit the object and subtract it from the other one. So let's now go to the Edit tab and hit Subtract. Nope, let's bring it down a bit first and subtract. And there we have a nice shell. Our next step will be to create several layers for our snowflake. So I'm going to simply copy paste our ring or our shell here. I'm going to make sure I unlock it and then simply scale it up. Now notice I can still change each individual axis here, and what I want to do is indeed make it a little flatter. When I scaled it, it was still locked, so the whole thing scaled by 2 times or however large I made it. This way we can make sure it's the same thickness as the first ring before it. And once we moved it into place, we have now our nice hexagonal snowflake body. The next step will be to create the extrusions from our snowflake body. Now that we've created the hexagonal kind of outline, we can then create protrusions, or essentially straight sticks that come off of the edges that line up with the axes inside the hexagon. So as you'll see here, I'll go ahead and insert a box and create just a really long thin rectangle. And here I'm manually choosing the length or the size of it, although I could simply click and drag. I want to make sure that all of them are even, and so I'm just going to manually input that number here. And you can make it as large or small as you'd like. So once I edit the angle, and I move it into place, you'll notice I do still need to extend it just a bit more. But the nice thing is, once we do have these in place, I can then simply copy paste and align it with every other axis in the hexagon, if I so choose to do that. You'll notice how I'll go back and forth using the Rotate tool, and you always want to make sure that you have selected only the object that you're trying to manipulate. If you accidentally select multiple, then you start moving or rotating several things, and it can get out of hand pretty quickly. So there we go. Now I've got the second one lined up, and it looks like we're just missing one more. And each of these angles, luckily, tends to be a multiple of 30, so it makes it pretty easy to guess which angle we need. And there we have it. It looks kind of like a spider web. And for the last step, we're just going to add some extra decoration. So of course, if we select 2 of these, we can copy paste to create a second version of that. And I'm actually going to scale it down. So this is one way to preserve the exact angles that we created with all of our geometry. But in this case, I simply want to attach this to the ends of our snowflake, or our body axes here. You'll notice our snowflake starts to take shape as I simply start copying and pasting these and putting them all around. Now, it'll be up to you which design you ultimately want to go with, but since this was a fairly simple geometric pattern here, I chose to go with this design. And you can always add on to it or manipulate it however you'd like. Notice when I'm attaching them, because of the dimensions that I chose, I didn't quite have enough space in between each end. Ultimately, I could simply shrink each one down further, but for the purposes of this video, we're just going to keep moving forward. And you'll notice how when it came time to adjust the ends, I'm simply rotating one of them as opposed to rotating both. It just, again, makes it a little easier to work with, and that way I can ensure things aren't getting out of hand. And I'm just going to finish up by continuing to copy paste and adding these decorative pieces to each end. I'm going to move this one over just a little bit, try and get it to line up at least. And after this, you can even go so far as to creating several layers on top of this. For our purposes here, we're simply going to finish up with this single outer layer. And if we wanted to, we can even add more decoration to the inside. And one last thing, don't worry too much about the colors of the objects at this point. That's simply denoting the original base object that we used. Once we group everything together, 3D Builder will select the same color for all of these objects, and we won't have to worry about the specific colors when it comes time to print, if you do have a 3D printer available. So with that last piece in place, again, you can go through and make sure everything lines up perfectly. Make sure to deselect or select only the objects that you're trying to manipulate. And in this case, I'm going to copy paste the middle bar here, and I do want to add just a little bit more extension to each one. So there I go. I did adjust it manually, so I can simply make the same adjustments to the others. And we have a nice looking snowflake. But of course, a snowflake like this doesn't do you much for decorative purposes. So what if we add a ring to it? That way we can hang it up, we can attach it to our backpacks, we can put it on our clothes. So I'm going to insert what's called a torus. It's a nice little donut looking shape. And I'm going to move it on over to one of the ends. Now you do want to attach it to one of the thicker pieces in the body. That'll ensure that when you group it and print it, it stays pretty solid and gives it less of a chance to break. So there you go. With that in place, you can adjust that ring depending on what you're going to attach it to. So in this case, you can make it just a little smaller. Again, notice how I had everything selected. We're going to deselect everything and only select the torus here. And this looks much more appropriate for maybe stringing some ribbon or some wire through it and putting it around the house. So let's make sure we are attaching it correctly. And the final step would be to simply select all, group it, and save your file as an STL and prepare it for printing. I hope you've enjoyed this quick and easy snowflake design. Happy holidays, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.